All right, YouTube, it's just been confirmed that the suspicions that probably most of us already had were true, that Obama once again has lied regarding the NSA, and that NSA agents did conduct surveillance on American citizens without warrants. Unlawful, again. Most of what the NSA is doing is unlawful. My belief is that eventually law will catch up to this surveillance apparatus and that will become retroactively clear. But this goes beyond that, in that specifically it is talking about warrantless searches of information that has been collected. Let us remember when the NSA scandal first broke, and there's a link in the description, by the way. When it first broke, Obama said, "Oh, well, it's all only conducting surveillance on individuals, essentially foreign targets and people who are talking with foreign targets, and it's just metadata. All we're doing is seeing who's calling who, at what time, for what length." And the idea was that by that metadata, you could sort of tell, essentially, people who might be of interest, and then you could further conduct surveillance on them if it was necessary. And that's what Obama came out, and these people like Clapper came out and said. And people said, well, it's a little bit strange, it's a little bit questionable, but that's okay. Then it turned out the metadata collection was essentially all metadata, uh, which invalidates what Obama said. So then he said, oh, well, don't worry, all this is we're collecting the metadata, but don't worry, we're just sort of archiving it, and we're only combing through this small percentage of stuff. Then it turned out it was also email, it was web traffic, it was literally everything, phone calls, the actual content of phone calls, literally anything you can think of that goes through any electronic system is being, surveilled. And people were like, well, what the fuck? You just lied to us. And Obama said, well, don't worry. Again, it's just being archived. We obtain reasonable warrants. Only a small amount's gone through, so on and so forth. Now it turns out that too was a lie. Now I expected that this would be the case. It was obvious to anyone with a functioning mind that the government was looking through this information without warrants, because the government can always use the excuse, well, this is just part of an archive. We're not actually conducting surveillance on citizens. All we're doing is combing through materials that were already collected. They're archived electronic materials, transcripts, metadata, emails, phone records, phone conversations that have been recorded, web results, and so forth. So it turns out that that's a lie. Actually, the government conducts these searches on people without any warrant whatsoever. All it has to do is collect your data and archive it, let it sit there for a while, and then say, well, now it's part of our archived records. We're not conducting surveillance on this person. All we're doing is going through archives that are already in our computers. It's unlawful. Clearly, what part of that does the average person not understand? And you still see these people on this story and others saying, well, if you don't have anything to hide, then you don't have anything to fear. Well, Obama and his cronies hid this whole program from America, first and foremost. So you've got that. So, what were they afraid of with people knowing that this was going on? Probably public outcry. Number two, it violates the Constitution. This particular aspect goes far beyond simply surveillance. I think most people were fairly comfortable with the idea that we would collect the metadata of people who were calling potentially questionable foreign individuals. I think that falls within the realm of common sense. I don't think the average person had a great deal of a problem with this. When it turned out that it was much more than that metadata, that it was constantly, day after day, being archived, that it was also being conducted directly on not just foreigners, but foreign heads of state, all citizens within the United States. If you own a cell phone or you've ever sent an email, it's in an NSA archive somewhere, at least if you've done it within the last 10, 15 years. That starts to make people feel uncomfortable. And while we probably should have had the foresight to know that something like this was going on, because, there are other data collection programs as well, this one seems to be by far the most pervasive. And you don't see any apologies. The worst thing is, what you see from Obama is time after time, in order to sort of squelch out the public outcry, he says something that sounds comforting to the people, and he lies through his teeth. And then it's later exposed that he was lying. Well, here's another exposing on his liardom, the liar in chief, essentially. And again, These programs didn't start under Obama, but they were expanded under Obama. Most of the NSA's more pervasive functions did not start under Bush. Yes, the Patriot Act and all of that stuff that allowed it began under Bush. But most of the more pervasive methods that they are now using are relatively new. He not only continued their ability to perform what he should have, with the law degree that he should have known that this was against the Constitution. Apparently, they don't teach that in law school for some reason. Not only extended their ability to operate in that original capacity, but then expanded upon it. And then he comes out with this half-assed reform to say, oh, well, we're going to reform just the phone call aspect of it. And don't worry, the government won't store it. We'll just store it off-site with a business or something, and then we'll still comb through it as we want to, which isn't a reform at all when you really think about it. And go through this article. Washington, AP. The Obama administration has conducted warrantless searches of Americans' communications as part of the National Security Agency's surveillance operations that target foreigners located outside of the U.S., the administration's top intelligence official confirmed in a letter to Congress disclosed Tuesday. It is not constitutional for the United States government or any of its agencies to conduct surveillance on American citizens, regardless of how they might be suspected of wrongdoing, unless it obtains a warrant. And the worst thing here, I think that what really shocks me the most, it doesn't shock me that there were warrantless searches going on at some level. It shocks me here, though, that it was, actually sort of codified in their operations. What really shocks me is that they already have these FISA courts. They're not publicly accountable. They're not transparent. We're not seeing transcripts of what goes on there. We're not sure necessarily who's on them. They've got these FISA courts that essentially will rubber stamp literally any request by the government or any of its agencies to go through citizens' records and listen to their phone calls and obtain their emails. We had rogue agents at the NSA that were using some sort of weird thing to spy on their ex-girlfriends and stuff. They've already got these rubber stamping courts. So why, if they have essentially a rubber stamping process for anything they want to do, why would they then not think that it was necessary to do it without a warrant? They can already get a warrant from this dubiously legal so-called judiciary group anytime they want to. So what makes it are these instances in which even the rubber stamping FISA court would find there was no grounds for them to actually go through people's material? Are we talking about activists? Are we talking about leaders in the political opposition? Are we talking about they were conducting surveillance directly on members of Congress, as the Senate has already proclaimed several weeks ago? Are we talking about these agents are conducting surveillance on other agencies? Are they conducting surveillance? Essentially, are they conducting surveillance in such a way or on such people that even a rubber stamping agency deliberately set up to greenlight anything that the reigning administration wants to do would find them dubious and questionable? That's my thought. My thought is that that can be the only logical reason why they would use warrantless searches in this case, because they already have a process in place that will rubber stamp 99% of all requests that they put in to these FISA courts. These searches were authorized by a secret surveillance court in 2011, but it was unclear until Tuesday whether any such searches on Americans had been conducted. Again, not a warrant. What they're referring to and what was okayed are searches when the FISA court grants a warrant. Essentially, they can grant a blanket warrant to conduct surveillance on the entire population, as they explicitly have, which is also unlawful, but, it's through a court. And they can grant warrants to go through specific individuals or organizations, or, everyone within a building or within a political group or something, some, cultist faction. But this is warrantless. This is talking about these agents are being told to conduct surveillance on people directly and comb through those archives of their conversations without any warrant even being issued. If this is the case, if they're prefacing this by saying, but don't worry, the FISA court okayed this in 2011, under Obama, by the way, not Bush, if that's the case, then what you're saying is essentially they can go through anyone's records without any further warrant being issued because they've got that okay from the FISA court. But did they issue an actual warrant for the entire population? Or again, is this being used as a method to go through people's information in such a way, or to target such individuals, that it would be dubious even to a rubber stamping agency? Senior officials have sometimes suggested that government agencies do not deliberately read Americans' emails, monitor their online activity, or listen to their phone calls without a warrant, which is bullshit. Democratic Senators Ron Wyden and Mark Udall said in a joint statement. However, the facts show that those suggestions were misleading. They weren't misleading, they were lies. And that intelligence agencies have indeed conducted warrantless searches for Americans' communications. Well, no shit. You give a government agency this kind of power and leverage, it's going to misuse that power and leverage. What part of this process do people not comprehend? It seems that Congress is like a bunch of college kids that don't even understand how the world functions. It's pretty sad. Wyden has pressed the administration on whether these searches on Americans have occurred. In a March 28th letter to Wyden, James Clapper, the government's top intelligence official, said the NSA had searched for Americans' communications within information it collected when it targeted foreigners located outside the U.S. In his letter, Clapper also pointed to a declassified document released last August that also acknowledged the use of such searches, and stated that these searches were reviewed and there was no finding of wrongdoing. It was unclear how often these searches were conducted, so they don't even know how often this happens. And individual agents, by the way, if they can spy on their ex-girlfriends, they can spy on anyone that they happen to want to spy on. And they probably can enter a search term and see all the conversations from time periods that contain that word. Which is disconcerting because they might start going after, just liberals or just conservatives or just evangelicals or atheists or any other subgroup of the population, which should worry everyone. It shouldn't just worry, Republicans or just worry people who are libertarian or whatever. It should worry literally everyone in the country, and they should be calling for impeachment right now. Somehow, magically, they haven't. I'm not sure why. Documents disclosed last year by, that just goes into Edward Snowden. That's fairly old news. I don't know about if he's releasing leaks anymore. I don't know. Maybe the rest is in his doomsday cache. And he just hasn't released it yet. Overall, this is disconcerting at best, blatantly illegal at worst. It's fairly clear that government agencies don't have the right to do this. Unfortunately, people were so swept up into the paranoia following 9/11 that they said, okay, give us the Patriot Act. We're patriots. We would never question the government. Go ahead and conduct all the searches and surveillance that you want to find these terrible terrorists that killed these few thousand people, because our freedoms don't actually matter. And I can remember, because it was a Republican president, there was outcry at the time among certain far-left groups, and you saw like they were trying to conduct surveillance in libraries, and all the libraries around here had little placards up saying, we will not cooperate, we will not give out your information. Some others said, your information might be intercepted by the government, but we oppose this. And now all of a sudden Obama gets in there on the promise of, I'll cut down this surveillance state, and nobody in the left cares anymore. It's astonishing how things change. And this is why I no longer consider myself a Democrat or care about that party, because I saw the hypocrisy, because I saw how bad Bush was and their outcry. And I was like, well, bravo for you. Obama sounds pretty good. And then Obama did the same thing and they shut up and said nothing. Just like people like Bill O'Reilly, that had complained loud and long during the Clinton administration, didn't say a word, no matter what Bush did. It's magical how this happens. They're all paid to say these things. But this is an issue that goes beyond partisan politics. This should enrage Democrats and Republicans. It should enrage everybody. It shouldn't matter what religion or race or creed or, political party a person is a member of. This is unlawful. This is unconstitutional. It's clearly unconstitutional. There will be people who will say that it's not simply because Obama happens to be a Democrat, or simply because they happen to like him for some reason, or he has black skin, so they don't want to speak out because they'll be called racist. Well, I don't care. Obama has severely overstepped the boundaries here. He was aware this was going on. It's a far stretch of the imagination to say he wasn't. I suggested at the time Bush should have been impeached for war crimes. Obama now should be impeached for violating the Fourth Amendment. It would be nice if other people understood this fact. Essentially, what people seem to think is, they'll complain, they'll say, well, it shouldn't be easy to impeach a president. No, well, it shouldn't be prohibitively hard either. The population could call for Obama to be removed from office on this basis, and it would be a legal reason to do so. The only reason why people aren't calling for it is that nobody seems to have woken up to the fact that this is unlawful, that it's against the very founding values of our country. It's really sad, because people should know better. People within the United States, people in other countries right now have a better grasp on how bad Obama really is than people in this country do. Just like people in other countries were saying Bush was a warmonger, Bush is violating your laws, why are you people allowing the Patriot Act? And they were right, and we ignored them because we were ethnocentric and said, well, this is America, we don't listen to you commies over here. And it's sad, because now we have clear picture that both parties do not care about you. To them, you are just essentially a number, your metadata, and a collection of all the stuff you've ever done online. And the only time that these hypocrites in the Senate have spoken out is when they were the ones upon which surveillance was being conducted. Oh no, now you've gone too far. And then they quickly shut up because they wanted to close ranks. And they still have a few hearings here and there with Clapper, and they sort of give him a few softball questions. Hopefully this will wake even them up, because this should concern them as well, because then what happens if a Republican takes the presidency and says to the NSA, oh, by the way, you can conduct all the warrantless searches that you want on the Democrats, and we'll get all their dirty laundry, and then we'll leak it. Because no one's ever going to know. They've got the best hackers. They've got the best cover-up scheme. Nobody's ever going to know. We can take them all out. We can crush the Democratic Party forever. People aren't concerned about this happening. People on the left aren't concerned about the eventual probability that some scumbag gets into office and uses this to persecute atheists or gay activists or feminists or abortion clinic providers or something. This should concern the left as much as it concerns the right. And the only reason that they shut up is because they're still in love with Obama. For some unknown reason, despite all of his failures, they still think that he is some sort of messianic figure. Just as there was that small minority of GOP members who swore up and down that Bush was an angel sent down from heaven, regardless of how he mishandled the economy and the wars and No Child Left Behind and all of these other things, regardless of what he did, he was still their shining little Christian captain on a hill, leading them into a crusade against militant Islam. Regardless of how little he understood about how the world works, they still loved him. And it seems even more pervasive with Obama. That is a huge problem. People have gone beyond support of country and now simply support some weird idealized version of our country that's based on this weird partisan misunderstanding that somehow a person has a D or an R after their name, and it makes them more trustworthy, and they've got good ideas because they've got a D or they've got an R. It's just like that Dr. Seuss book, where there were those creatures with stars on their chest, and then there were these creatures that didn't. And they kept discriminating against each other and saying, well, I'm better than you because I've got a star. Well, I'm better than you because I don't have a star. And pretty soon, nobody knew who anybody was anymore. Because it was clear they were bickering over something that was stupid. There was no real difference. Nobody really cared. They just wanted, the better lot in life. And it's the same with the D's and R's. They're the same exact fucking thing. You've got the retarded Republicans and the doofy ass Democrats, and both of them have mishandled the economy, and both of them have broken your trust. So why aren't you saying so? Why are you still buying into this two-party nonsense? It befuddles the mind. Maybe just people are stupid. I hope not. I hope people are a little smarter than that, but there's always the possibility that people are truly as retarded as some cynical individuals believe. That would be a sad statement for our country. Seeing how much we've prospered for the last few centuries, it would be truly a testament to cynicism if they were truly that dumb. That's about